Hello one and all, and welcome to another episode of From the Cinema. I am your host Josh Rudolph, and today I'm going to do something just a little bit different. Since Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, comes out in about a month or so, I thought it would be fun to go back and rewatch all episodic Star Wars movies and talk about them, review them, since I haven't seen them in a very long time, pretty much since The Force Awakens came out, and now since Disney Plus is out, I now have access to the Star Wars movies, so why not go check them out? And I decided to go back and start with episodes 1, 2, and 3, and that was a pretty big mistake. If there's one thing to know about me is that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I didn't necessarily grow up with it as a kid. I got into it when I was around like 11 or 12 or something like that, when Episode 1 was re-released in theaters in 3D back when they did that thing. And that's what got me into Star Wars, and ever since then I've been a huge Star Wars fan, but not the biggest Star Wars fan that has ever lived. But I still really enjoy the films. Now, I haven't seen the prequels in a very long time, so I was both concerned but also excited about watching them, because obviously they're not that good at films, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to be an optimist here, and it's going to be good. No. They got worse. I don't know how, but they got worse. Being much older, I have more knowledge of film and other things like that, how stories and structures and things should go, how films should, relatively be. These films were not that. I don't know exactly the best way to describe them, other than they're just not good films. Rather than go through each individual film and talk about them, since the problems are basically throughout all three of them, I'm just going to talk about all of them. And if we look at Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, it's tough to get through. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not good. George Lucas came back and wrote and directed all three of these films, and it shows, because he hadn't directed a film since the original Star Wars film back in 1977. So jumping back into the director's chair after over 20 years of not directing, it very much shows. He does not know how to direct his actors to act in the modes, and his writing does not help either. I don't know what he was on, but it's not good dialogue at all. In terms of like the action of the film, I found it to be quite boring. Like the final battle on Naboo was not like intense enough. It wasn't like fun enough. It just, because most of it was CGI and like people swinging lightsabers at nothing, I couldn't get invested in the fight, because there was nothing to get invested in, because there was obviously nothing there. And even like the Darth Maul fight, which people say is the best part of the film, I didn't care for it. Darth Maul was not built up well at all. Like, he showed up 2 or 3 times before, and we knew his name was Darth Maul, and he has horns and a lightsaber, and that's about all that we know about him. So how am I supposed to get invested in this fight? It is very poorly acted on pretty much almost everyone's part, besides Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor. They are the only ones that try here in this film, but everyone else does not. And then, of course, the kid that plays Anakin, not good. He has the same expression and like tonality to his voice the entire time. So even in like a dangerous and deadly situation, when Qui-Gon's like, "Oh, get into cover and stay out of sight so that way you don't die," he's like, "Sure, it sounds good." Like, in a very cheery attitude, and it's the weirdest thing. If you haven't seen it, maybe watch it just because it's a Star Wars film and just to refresh your mind, but go in expecting it to be a bad film, because it's not good. And I'm going to give Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, a 2 out of 10. It's one of the worst films I've seen in a very, very, very long time. Same goes for Episode 2. It's on the same levels of terrible quality as the first one, and this time Lucas upped the visual effects on this film and made them even more CGI, but because this was 2002 and it wasn't perfect at all back then, it shows horribly in so many ways. The characters, the backgrounds, the locations, most of it is CGI, and it's blatantly obvious. This is like Shark Boy and Lava Girl levels of bad effects. The story of the film is what honestly kills it, because Obi-Wan's on his own separate mission. Anakin is now grown up. He's trained to be a Jedi, and then he's falls in love with Padme. The problem with that story is that Anakin and Padme have no chemistry whatsoever. Their bland acting does nothing to help, and the dialogue is like Lucas trying to be like Shakespeare, but without understanding what made Shakespeare Shakespeare, so it's just bad. It doesn't understand how to structure the story, and it doesn't know what it wants to focus on. The story is all over the place, and building up to this intense third film, it's almost not there. We learn about this separatist, but we don't know who or what the separatists are. We just hear them in passing. We know Count Dooku's the villain of this film, at least. We know the Emperor is behind the shadows doing stuff. And that's about all we know of the separatists and all that. It's poorly built up on Lucas's part. And just like The Phantom Menace, the intensity and the cool factor of what should be in this film is non-existent. The final fight that's most of the third act, I got so bored throughout it. none of it I was invested in, none of it I cared about. When Jango Fett showed up, I'm like, oh good, you're about to die, because he's bad. There's nothing of intensity, there's nothing of worth really seeing in this film. There is one instance of actual good acting from someone that isn't Ewan McGregor, and that actually came from Hayden Christensen. You know the scene when what happens to his mother and what he does. Like, it's the only time we actually see true emotion come from him, and then that's it. Basically, all the problems between 1 and 2 are practically the same in almost every way, and that's really bad. And that's why I'm giving Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, a 2 out of 10 as well. It is just as bad as the first. Now, Episode 3, on the other hand, this is actually somewhat good. This seems like this is what Lucas had wanted to make the entire time, but he felt compelled that he had to make it a trilogy. But he shouldn't have. The structure of how it goes about it is actually kind of interesting in, like, you know, what's learned, like, you know, how Anakin changes, how he grows with Palpatine, everything like that. It actually kept me invested the entire time, and it never felt like the movie was dragging like episodes 1 and 2 were. And even the fight scenes, like, while they might be over choreographed and they're not my favorites, like, it still kept me invested because I actually cared about these characters for once. Now, granted, writing is still bad, and direction is still bad. There's Anakin, again, once again, played by Hayden Christensen. He's not that great of an actor, and like he could go back and forth on whether he was fine or whether he was bad, but then once it came to the third act, it got worse. Despite that, I still wanted to watch this film. Like, as I said, the action is probably the best out of all the prequels. The intensity is actually there for once. The effects are still kind of bad, not kind of, pretty bad. But the story is actually one that I can get invested in, and I was intrigued to see where it was going to go. It's the best of the prequels. It's the most entertaining. It's the one that has the best acting out of all of them. And the effects and fights are actually, like, you know, not that bad. It's still one that I could actually go back and say, yes, I want to watch this one. This is a good one, and I can have a good, fun time with it. And that's why I'm going to give Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, a 6 out of 10. Now, granted, I know that's not a high score, but compared to the other ones, it's the best out of them all, and it's the most watchable out of them all. Now, I know that what I've said might offend a lot of people somehow. I don't know how people can still praise these as good films. It still boggles me that they say The Last Jedi is the worst out of them all. Go back with an open mind and rewatch all of them with, like, an actual critical point of view and really, like, see, like, what the films do bad and what they do good, because each one does have slight elements of actual good film in there. But Episode 1 and 2 are the hardest ones to get through. Episode 3 is still the best. Still has a lot of problems, though. So that was my combo review of all 3 of the Star Wars prequels films. If you want to see me review the original trilogy and then the new films afterwards, make sure that you subscribe each and every week so that way you can see new videos. And make sure that you follow me and Mason Cable Network on all our social medias. And I will see you all next time.